let's talk a little more then, shall we, about the meeting happening this evening between Presidents Trump and Putin. Do you think it will work? What will we be looking for in this? I just find the whole thing fascinating, intriguing, as Jenny Mathis was saying, a lot of body language to read tonight as well. But do you think anything will come out of this? 03700 100 110. Andrew Levy's a former senior British diplomat who worked in Moscow, so can maybe give us an insight here into what might be in Vladimir Putin's mind. Hello, Andrew.
Hello.
Hi there. So we have a former Soviet and Russian security officer here who's shown himself to be pretty ruthless up against a businessman, former TV presenter. Do you fear that Putin may have it in his capacity to run rings around Donald Trump here?
Well, I certainly think you've described Putin correctly. And Donald Trump, unfortunately, has apparently, according to reporting we see from Washington, removed every single Russia expert from his orbit. So contrary to his first term, where he still kept some expertise in the National Security Council, he seems to be going into this blind. So I'd be pretty worried. That's the implication, I think, of your question. The other thing to say about Putin is that he and the narrow clique around him haven't changed in 30 years. They've had a plan that's been going all that time to reconstitute the Soviet Union, not so much for the glory of Russia, because Russia is really represented by him and the tiny clique, but because there are huge resources to be grabbed. Russia and the clique are the same thing in their eyes. And that area isn't just the old Soviet Union, it's the old Warsaw Pact. It's the area that was controlled by Russian troops after the Second World War and until the end of the Cold War. So that goes right up to the River Elbe, right down through the middle of Germany.
So do you think, and this is one of the great unknowns, we were speaking about this morning with Professor Paul Moorcraft, who you'll know, and was asking whether, does Vladimir Putin come looking for a way out of this war, which has already cost his country in excess of 1 million casualties? And if so, is there going to be a way out of it that he can still present as a victory? What do you think, Andrew?
No, I don't think he's looking for a way out of it, not in the sense that he would stop trying to acquire territory and resources further and further west, and in some other directions, by the way, but let's look at the westward direction towards us, if you like. As I say, that's been the long-term strategy. What Putin might want, underline might, is a temporary pause of some kind that can allow him to regroup, because his army is suffering terribly. He isn't doing so well on the ground, despite reports one sometimes sees, and there are very serious economic and social problems at home.
The fear must be, surely, that Vladimir Putin comes away, whether at this point or in the future, with a handful of concessions in exchange for an arrangement on the ground in Ukraine, which is totally unacceptable to Vladimir Zelensky. He says no to what's been put forward, but the offer's already been made for the concessions to Putin. He says, hold on, this is what you gave me.
Yes, the Ukrainians won't accept any such arrangement. So the only way they could end up acquiescing is if they were forced to. It's very hard to see how one forces them, but I suppose if the USA went to great trouble to cut off all arms supplies, the Europeans are doing a pretty good job at the moment. They could do a much better job. They is we, the UK as well. But a lot of that relies on being able to buy American weapons. There aren't so many replacements for a lot of the American weapons. So if one forced Zelensky in some way to capitulate, yeah, but otherwise the Ukrainians aren't going to. So then this dreadful situation continues. But it's not going to stop if Putin temporarily stops, because he's going to regroup and start invading again later.
How do you play a negotiation like this, and how ought one play a negotiation like this with somebody like Vladimir Putin, who is so skilled in the tactics required to get what he wants?
I think, to be fair, Trump is trying to suggest that it isn't a negotiation, that it's just a sit down ahead of a future meeting, which might be a negotiation, but the reporting changes every day. But to your point, the first thing you do is you understand who's opposite you. And this is where we have the biggest problem, because I really do think that the American system has denuded itself of Russia expertise and of expertise about Putin. And also that President Trump doesn't seem to pay much attention to it even when it is there. So that's a very poor starting point. The other point is to be clear about what your objectives are. And it's not clear to me that Trump has a set of realistic or clear objectives. Does he want Russia to retreat and not to bother the rest of Europe anymore? Doesn't seem to be clear about that. Okay, so does he want to do a great big grand bargain with Russia and get a lot of business deals? Well, that's fine, except that from a certain narrow point of view, but that Russia is going to, and Putin is going to destabilize the whole of Europe. And Europe is essential to US national security. So I really don't understand the Trump strategy, or if there is a clear one.
Well, thank you very much. It is fascinating, as I say. So thank you for your insight. Andrew Levy, former senior British diplomat who'd spent some time working in Moscow. So was able